Good morning. I tried to record some of this yesterday and it just did not go well because it didn't save the video. But we're going to go back today and we're going to have a devotion even though we can't be together in person. And hopefully next week we'll be able to be back together and it'll be a great week. Uh, some of you know last Sunday our dog Duke passed away. He was 11 years old and it was an interesting week. This is not the first animal that we've lost, but it's always really difficult when you've had an animal for a long time and your family's very close. And when you have kids, it's even a little bit more different because you have to walk them through that process of grief. And Darcy had her moment on Sunday, but Friday is actually when I was able to get out and take him to the pet crematory in Lexington. That's the first time we've ever had a pet cremated. But as you all know, the ice outside has not allowed us to go dig a hole. So we took him in. And once we got home after dropping him off, it was really then that it hit Weston in particular that he was never going to see him again. And so as we're walking through this process of grief and that it's okay to cry and that these things happen and he had a good life with us, my mind went to Ecclesiastes, and particularly Ecclesiastes 3. A lot of you know this passage, and it says, "There is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather them, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to search and a time to give up, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. What do workers gain from their toil? I have seen the burden God has laid on the human race. He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart. Yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. I know there is nothing better for people than to be happy and to do good while they live, that each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all their toil. This is the gift of God." So that passage is well known in particular for comfort for those who are grieving, who don't know what to do. And I do love this passage because we have to go through all these cycles sometimes. Sometimes there is a time to be silent. Sometimes there is a time to speak. Sometimes there is a time to weep or a time to laugh. Sometimes there's a time to tear apart and separate from relationships because they're not healthy, and there's times to mend relationships. Ecclesiastes itself is an interesting book because this is one of the more optimistic passages in Ecclesiastes. A lot of what Solomon writes in this is quite depressing, actually. He says, "As for humans, God tests them so they may see that they are like the animals. Surely the fate of human beings is like that of the animals. The same fate awaits them both. As one dies, so dies the other. All have the same breath. Humans have no advantage over animals. Everything is meaningless. They all go to the same place. They all come from dust, and to dust return." There's a lot of that in the book of Ecclesiastes. And I was thinking, while reading through Ecclesiastes, it's one of my favorite books to kind of go back to. It's the 25th anniversary of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, or the first one being released as a movie. I love the Lord of the Rings. I've read the books. I've read The Hobbit. And so this week and last week we started and we watched all 3 extended editions of the Lord of the Rings movies and then all 3 of the Hobbit movies. And I think it was very interesting because if you read the books, and The Hobbit was written much more for children than it was for older young adults or adults like the Lord of the Rings was. So The Hobbit has a little bit different tone than the Lord of the Rings book. And I was reading a book last night that was talking about finding God in The Hobbit. And it's interesting because the elves in the Hobbit book are a lot different from the elves in the movies. they are they laugh and they make fun and they sing and they are rather foolish and silly. And what we find here in this book, I love this quote. It says, "Can anyone, we are exiles in enemy territory, hemmed in on every side by darkness and despair. Terrorism, tsunamis, hurricanes, floods, wars, senseless suicide bombings, and such things have become defining features of our contemporary landscape. That's not to mention the desperate and subtle wickedness that lurks in the deepest regions of every human heart. So, can anyone laugh and sing in a world like ours?" And it says, "The elves of Rivendell from The Hobbit say yes. And they say so out of a context of hard earned practical experience. More than any other people in Middle Earth, the elves know what it means to fail, for they have fallen from grace and tasted the bitter cost of redemption. They realize what it will take to defeat the shadow and heal the wounds of the world, and yet they are not above singing in the trees. Instead, they understand a certain amount of joyful abandon is essential to a life lived in harmony with the truth, however foolish and small it looks to serious-minded folk like Thor and the Dwarf. For to laugh in desperate circumstances and sing in the face of disaster is nothing less than an act of bold and daring faith. It is a sign of salvation to the watching world, evidence of the hope that lies just beyond the fringes of darkness." So I think it's interesting because in Ecclesiastes it seems very hopeless. He's like, life is meaningless, you just need to enjoy it while you can. But I think a lot of what Solomon says is you do have to enjoy life, even in the face of disaster, in the face of trials. There is a certain amount of hope that is found when you have faith in Jesus and faith in God, that He is in control of all things. He says, "For who knows what is good for a person in life during the few and meaningless days they pass through like a shadow? Who can tell them what will happen under the sun after they are gone?" And then he also says, "I have seen something else under the sun. The race is not to the swift, or the battle to the strong, nor does food come to the wise, or wealth to the brilliant, or favor to the learned, but time and chance happen to them all. Moreover, no one knows when their hour will come. As fish are caught in a cruel net, or birds are taken in a snare, so people are trapped by evil times that fall unexpectedly upon them." Yeah, bad things happen. We live in a fallen world that is full of sin, that is full of trouble. There's always going to be trouble among us while we live in this world and we're not in the new heaven and the new earth. But like the elves of The Hobbit and like Solomon, we can, even in the face of trials and adversity, he says, "Go and eat your food with gladness and drink your wine with a joyful heart, for God has already approved what you do. Always be clothed in white, and always anoint your head with oil. Enjoy life with your wife whom you love, all the days of this meaningless life that God has given you under the sun. For whatever your hands find to do, do it with all your might." We have to keep working. We have to keep singing. We have to find hope in hopeless situations. And I know some of you it feels like you are worn down. You're going through day after day. Some of you have changed your 2 millionth diaper this morning. Some of you have gone back and forth to the hospital to see your mother. Some of you are overwhelmed by the bills that just keep coming. And I get that. I get it. We live in a world that is full of trouble. There's news on TV that's overwhelming, that feels burdensome. And yet Solomon and the Hope of Jesus say, you keep going. You do what you do every day and find joy in the small places. Find hope in the fact that God is still God, that He is still in control. that He knows what's going on, and He is the one who has authority, who has the ability to do what needs to be done. I am thankful that we have a hope like that in a world that is so filled with trouble and so filled with burdens. We've got to live with that small spark, that small joy. We have to continue to laugh and find a reason to love, to have fun, to do those small things that seem so meaningless in the big scope of the world. But it's when we love well, when we laugh well, when we find joy, when we find peace, when we find hope, that's when we shine a light in a dark place. So, see you next week.